always overwhelming to step on this stage and be able to talk to you about the Lord. And definitely in one of those places today. If you don't know me, I am the family pastor here, which means I kind of am over 0 to seniors and get the lovely opportunity to work with all the kids, and I love it. Keeps me young for sure. You didn't know this, I'm 70 years old, so I know I don't look it. It's because I still work with young people. Such a blessing. But what I want to talk to you about today is, for sure, this is a disclaimer right here, is not just a message I feel like the Lord has put on my heart to share with you, but it is a personal journey that really I'm in the middle of right now. So what I'm talking to you about is not something that I've perfected, but something I'm in a journey on, and I feel it's valuable to share with you because I want to encourage you to go on this journey with me. I was at a party last night, a surprise party for a dear friend of mine, Janet Seaton. And even though I'm 70, she just turned 40, right? Was that what it was, 40? So it was a surprise party for her. And someone came up to me at the party and they said, "What's wrong with you tonight? You're so melancholy." I was like, "What are you talking about? I've talked to a bunch of people." And then she said, "Who have you talked to?" I listed like 3 people. But part of this journey that I'm on has to do with that and the fact that I'm a loud person-ish. I don't know if you know me, you know this about me. Fast-paced. Like the joke has been in our family for a long time when we get to church or anywhere. Before Julia can even open her door to get out of the car, I'm already inside. So learning to slow down has been this process for me, and I'm not good at it. And so then but inevitably, when you do start to slow down as a energetic, passionate, fast-moving person, very high-paced, everyone's like, "What's wrong with you?" There's something wrong with you. And probably, I don't want to say it's wrong to move fast, but probably the wrong thing about me was the fact that I move so fast through life. So that we're going to talk a little bit about that today on this personal journey I'm on. But if you have your Bibles, if you could turn to John chapter 1, 35. We'll read 35 through 38. I'll be reading in the NIV most of the time, just so you know. It should be on the screens, I think. It says this, John 1, 35 through 38. The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" Before we go anywhere, I just want you to think for a second. You're following Jesus in this room, most of you. And if Jesus was to turn around, because he's moving and you're moving with him, if he was to turn around, stop, and look at you and say, "What do you want?" how would you respond? That's overwhelming to me, just to think that Jesus is staring at me, asking me, like, I'm trying to think, how is he asking? Like, what do you want? Like, why are you following me? Like, what's happening here? Like, why you got to be all up in my business? Like, at this point in time, Jesus didn't have any disciples. No one had been following him yet. And I'm assuming that this didn't just maybe happen in 10 feet, but he may have been going from town to town, and finally he realized, these guys following me everywhere. What do you want? He didn't have this crowd yet. This is new for him. What do you want? In fact, these were his first 2 disciples. What do you want? How would you respond if Jesus turned around and asked you that direct question? What do you want? Or what do you want from me? I'm sure that we probably have a long list of things that we would say that we want from God. Let's get a little bit into that. So I'm going to be talking to you from 3 different points of view today. 1, as a pastor, encouraging you. Two, as a parent, and how I encourage my kids in this thought process that we're talking about. And number three, most importantly, as an individual that's walking through this journey that I'm about to share with you. There's recently been a lot of talk about this revival that is happening in Asbury, Kentucky. Have you heard about this? It has recently been not shut down, but pushed out to churches because it started at a college campus. And my oldest son, Isaac, who's graduating from high school this year, had an opportunity he just decided, me and my friends, it was the day the Chiefs parade on Wednesday. School's canceled for everybody's like, we're gonna drive to Kentucky on Wednesday, Dad, since there's no school. I was like, okay. You've never driven to Topeka, and you want to drive to Kentucky. So we got all these range of emotions going on, like as parents, like, do we let this kid drive? Like, what happens if he doesn't know anything about cars? He probably didn't even know what oil is. He could barely probably put gas in the car. I mean, he's just new at this, and we're going to let him drive to Kentucky with his friends. But, obviously this is an admirable thing that he wants to do. He wants to go see what the Lord is doing. He's never seen anything like this. And so him and his friends, there was one adult chaperone, that's made this trip easier, that went out there with them. And I knew when he went that he wouldn't be back Thursday. I was like, you're not going to want to turn around and come back Thursday. And he ended up staying all the way through Sunday. And if you've ever, there's the new movie, Jesus Revolution, that has come out, and some of you were around during that time, some of you weren't, but it's an absolutely incredible movie. Just gives you an idea of how God started to really move in this country. It's absolutely incredible thought process to see this happen. I just recently saw it, and that's coming out when this revival is happening. And when you hear the word revival, you may think of all kinds of different things, right? Like healings, miracles, the presence of God is just pouring out, and people are just weeping and crying, like all this like very emotional, not hyped, but just a lot of stuff happening, right? And the more I started hearing about this revival at Asbury, the more I started to hear this word thrown out that this people would say they would get online or see a posting on Instagram or Facebook, and they would just be overwhelmed with the peace of God. You didn't see, the services were interesting. Like, I went to a revival when I was in high school in Brownsville, Florida. It was incredible, and there'd be a speaker that comes. They'd have these salvation calls. This thing, there was no speakers. People would come up and talk and give testimonies, but it wasn't led. It wasn't a service. It was just a time to sit in the presence of the Lord. And so people who were watching this were saying, every time I get on, I just want to weep because I am overwhelmed with the peace and presence of God. I was like, okay, that's an interesting thought. And then when Isaac comes back, Isaac is strong-willed. He is passionate about what he believes in. He is not afraid to share his opinion. He is structured. He wants to have a plan. And he comes back, and this is what my wife wrote about it. She said, there is such a stillness, a peace, a presence upon Isaac. He has such an awe and trust in the Lord. There is no hype. It is so pure, not forced. It is as if the gentleness and kindness of God has been poured out over him. There's a humble anointing upon him. As his mother, I've raised him in church for 18 years and have never felt what I feel that Jesus is doing in him right now. There was a presence about him. He said when they were there, they would spend hours there and just sit in this prayer room, and it wouldn't seem like hours. The time didn't seem like it was time. And Isaac's a thinker, she says, sometimes, and sometimes he's an overthinker, and he wants or likes to have everything figured out, very strong, and he came back with a trust and no worry. I read that to you because we are living in an age where the sicknesses and illnesses that plague this time are more than a pandemic of COVID, but are an emotional perspective with anxiety and depression. The numbers are up across the board in every age group, across every decade that you would look at, higher than they've ever been before. So you got to think, is that because things are worse here? Is America and the world worse than it's ever been? Like, these are questions that I'm asking myself. And so I don't think it's a surprise if I would say to you that we know the world has sped up at a frenetic pace. We feel it in our bones. We feel it in our activities. We feel it on Sundays when it should be a day of Sabbath. We feel it all the time. But I want to tell you, it hasn't always been this way. And it hasn't always been this way, really. It's only been like this for a short period of time in the grand scope of things. But it all started, did you know that ever since time, and I'm going to say some weird things. You know, time was invented. Time was not a thing until really the sundial was created. And even when the sundial was created, people were frustrated. Way back at the beginning of time-ish, created artificial time with the sundial. But it wasn't until 1370 that the first public clock was built in Germany. And before that time was natural. It was linked to the rotation of the earth and the 4 seasons. You went to bed with the moon. You got up with the sun. Days were long and busy in the summer, and they were short and slow in the winter. But the clock changed all of that. It created what I just said, artificial time. We stopped listening to our bodies, started rising when our alarms droned that special beat, or now it's our cell phones. And everyone knows when they hear that certain ring on their cell phone, it just makes you cringe, right? This oppressive siren, right, to our bodies. We have become more efficient as people than we've ever been, but also more like machines and less like human beings. One historian said this: "Here is man's declaration of independence from the sun, new proof of his mastery over himself and his surroundings. Only later would it be revealed that he had accomplished this mastery by putting himself under the dominion of a machine with imperious demands all of its own." When the sun set our rhythms and our work and rest, it did so, and this is going to think about this for a second, it did so under the control of God, but the clock is under the control of who? Not us, of our employer, right? Right? Or our schools, which would be our bosses, students. And this is a far more demanding master. Do you guys know what happened in 1879? Historians out there? There's this guy named Edison, Titus. He created what was called the light bulb. That he's praised because he failed like 999 times at making the light bulb, and then on the 1,000th. And people always talk about that story. But when the light bulb was created, now it made it possible to stay up past sunset. Do you know what the average sleep time was for a person at the beginning of the 20th century in 1900? 11 hours of sleep a night. The average person slept for 11 hours a night. Listen, I'll get into 5 hours and my body wakes up and I can't shut it down. I can't get to 11 hours for 3 days. Right? I dream, 11 hours, that almost is stressful. How can I feel like, was he in a coma? They'd probably be checking my pulse and calling the doctors. Is he in a coma? He's been asleep for 8 hours. What's wrong with him? We all probably feel like that in some way, shape, right? And my whole life, I've heard these incredibly great stories about these theologians, right? That would get up at 4 a.m. and they would pray and seek the Lord, like Smith, Wigglesworth, and all these, Charles Spurgeon, all these incredible, incredible people. But guys, they were going to bed at 7 p.m. They were waking up at 4 a.m. and they didn't know what to do. They're like, well, just better pray. They weren't getting up early. They were just getting up because their bodies were ready to get. They were definitely more spiritual than me. Seriously, I know I'm just joking a little bit right now. They were way more spiritual than me. But I probably could have gotten up at 4 a.m. and prayed if I was going to bed at 11. It gets dark at 5 in the winter here. Man, can you imagine going to bed at 5 o'clock? We used to. Are any of my kids in here? Yeah, they are. We used to, before they got watches, we'd get home in the winter. It'd be 5 o'clock and getting dark. And Julie would be hit me in the knee, and I'd run inside, and I'd change all the clocks 2 hours later, from 5 to 7. The kids would walk in, I'm like, boys, it's time for bed. Because this is the thing, our kids would, they would get up at the same time every morning, whether they would stay up late or went to bed early. So we'd come in and be like, it's 7 o'clock, boys, time to start getting ready for bed. And they would go to bed, and we'd be like, what do we do? What's that? What's going on? And then they got watches, and we forgot, and we changed the clocks one time, and Isaac was like, Dad, it's only 5 o'clock. I'm like, oh, how did the oven say 7? What happened? I don't know. Well, the power must have went out at the house. I don't know. You know what we are down to in sleep hours? The average American sleeps 7 hours a night now. That is a 4-hour time difference. It's any wonder why we are so exhausted. Back in the day, what would happen is, think about this. You'd get up. Sun comes up, you'd have to go to the woods, you'd have to chop down a tree, you'd have to worry about you getting eaten by animals, you'd get back to your house, you'd cut up the wood, you'd throw it in the fire, and then you'd have heat. It'd only take about 3 hours to get that heat going. Now we're like, hey, Siri, if I'm in Pastor Kevin's house, it's like, Siri, turn up the heat. Like, yells at the phone. Didn't even need to walk to his phone. He could, be sitting down and just yell, and the heat gets up. It's crazy. Just things have changed. We used to walk everywhere, right? Now we have cars. We used to make our food from scratch. Now we have fast food. We used to write letters. And now we have a chat bot, AI, that will write our English papers for us. Isn't that, sorry, students, don't listen to me. Literally will take your personality and write the paper in your personality. Incredible. Crazy. In fact, any student who asked me to fill out some scholarship thing for me, I just had the AI write it. I'm just messing. I didn't do that. I'm not that smart. I don't know how to use the internet. But in spite of all this, do we not feel like we have less time, not more? What's the problem? This is the journey I'm on. Labor-saving devices all save time. So where has all the time went? Well, that's an easy answer, right? It's been spent on other things. One famous Senate subcommittee in 1967 was told that by 1985, the average American would only work 22 hours a week for 27 weeks of the year. Yeah, in 1960, there were sci-fi writers, there were futurists, there were scientists. They thought we'd all be working less by now. Is that true? Everybody thought the main problem in America would be too much leisure time. Too much time off. What are we going to do with all this time? Since 1979, the average American literally works 4 more weeks per year than they did. Andrew Sullivan, in an essay for the New York Times, wrote this: the Judeo-Christian tradition recognized a critical distinction and tension between the noise and silence, between getting through the day and getting a grip on one's whole life. The Sabbath, the Jewish institution which is co-opted by Christianity, was a moment of calm to reflect on our lives under the light of eternity. It helped define much Western public life once a week for centuries, only to dissipate with scarcely a passing regret into the commercial tidal wave over the past couple decades. It reflected a now battered belief that a sustained spiritual life is simply unfeasible for most mortals without these refuges from noise and work to buffer us and remind us who we really are. We've lost more than a day of rest. We've lost a day for our souls to open up to God. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about today, I want you to know, I read this incredible book. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. If you have time or don't have time, make time to read this. It will challenge you to get back to being in touch with your spirit and your soul. A recent study, now listen, since I'm going to talk about something you really don't want me to talk about. Is that okay? They don't want me to say this, what I'm about to talk about, because it's about cell phones and technology. Just letting you know. Are you okay with that? And this is not to come against, listen, I think all this stuff's great. I saw a TikTok video, I think it was the other day, and they were showing They're making fun of people that say technology is too distracting when we drive, and it was showing a guy who had like printed off the Google MapQuest, and he was trying to get a CD out of his CD holder, to put his CD in the CD thing, and he was just trying to say, we're not more distracted as drivers than we used to be. It's actually easier. It was just a funny video to me. But a recent study of iPhone users touch their phone, his or her phone, 2,617 times a day. Another study of millennial users put that number as twice as high. So now it's time parent talk for a moment. I just want to give you students a little bit of a peek into our home life. Is that okay? Our boys do not get cell phones until they're 15. So what I'm about to say, if you're a parent in here, you parent how you feel best. I'm not telling you need to do it like this. This is how the groove and the way that we have found it as a family. But if you have a young child in here, I want you to think about this for a moment. We didn't give our kids cell phones until they're 15, so 2 of them have cell phones. It was a battle because all their friends had cell phones, smartphones, when they were in 6th grade, and they don't get them till they're freshmen. So that was always fun. They don't have social media. Our 18-year-old still does not have social media. Unless he's hiding it from us. Isaac, are you listening right now? Joking. Still do not, and so this is the path that we've chosen. I remember, and the fight has always been like, why can we not have cell phones? This is the common thing. Do you not trust us? Do you not trust me? What do you think I'm going to do on this thing? Why can't I have Snap? You don't trust me. Well, I remember when my oldest was in 8th grade, and I started to kind of research the vaping thing a little bit more. And did you know what some of the most popular vaping flavors are? Skittles, Fruity Pebbles, Starburst. You're like, that sounds disgusting. Well, who do you think that these vaping, I don't know any 55-year-old man who's going to be vaping Skittles. I don't know anybody who would, but I think to a teenager, when they hear, oh, you could vape Skittles? Like, wow, that sounds at least interesting, and then they got you hooked. And so what are they doing with vaping? They are literally creating a product not for adults, but for teenagers that when they're hooked on it, they'll have them for life. And so I was thinking about that as vaping, but I was thinking about it in even more of a grandiose aspect in this idea of cell phones. Right? Everything that is created in a cell phone was with the idea to get you hooked. These apps, social media, all of it. And so what I would tell my boys is, listen, it's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust these companies. I don't trust, because what they're doing is trying to get you to addicted. Okay? Pornography. What they're doing is trying to get it to you as easy as possible. They are marketing it towards you. They are pushing it towards you. They don't care about a 55-year-old person. That person will be dead and gone a long time, in a very near future. But you will be around for many more years. I want to get you addicted now. And so everything on a cell phone, from the porn industry to Netflix to everything, is catered towards young people with the idea that if we can get them addicted, that we'll have them for life. So parent talk is, well, you can't shelter your kids forever, right? That's the common thing. Well, you're just sheltering your kids because when they get older, guess what they're going to do? They're just going to jump in and they're going to go crazy. They're not even going to know what to do with all this social media. They're not even going to know how to handle it. It's going to be everywhere. They're going to be overwhelmed. And this is my response to you. Sheltering can be overwhelming, but this is how I view parenting. I view parenting that we are like funnels, right? And we are called not to keep our kids from everything, but to funnel the amount of information that comes at our teenagers, right? Because you have parents out there that aren't sheltering their kids at all. And when your little first grader meets little Timmy at the public school, and he already has a cell phone, and his parents have no idea what's going on that, he's like, hey, come look at this. And instantly, all of this information is coming at them that they can't even handle. Like, as a person who works with students for many years, I can't handle the amount of change and information that is happening. I can't imagine a first grader handling this information. And so it's not that we keep the information from our kids. It's that we funnel the activity that comes at them, so it's a little bit slower. So I know that when Isaac graduates, he's going to go do whatever he wants to do on social media. But I'm not as worried because of a couple reasons. His brain is more developed, okay? And he hasn't had to have his brain developed worrying about the social media side of being accepted, about being liked, about whether he's being bullied. We've allowed his brain to develop. He's going to eventually get there. Of course he is. But his brain is now more developed and mature to be able to handle that information as it comes at him. And all we've done as parents is funnel the quickness of that information that comes to him. Don't you love that talk, students? No, I know you love it, parents. But you're on your cell phones just as much either. I mean, I am, right? It's hard for me to tell my kids to put their cell phone down when I'm like, hey, kids, put your cell phone down. I know I'm making a joke of myself, but this is the challenge of my own life. I'm one of those 2,617 touches a day users. Sam Parker, the first president of Facebook, said this: God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. The thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious as possible. And that means we need to give sort of a little hit of dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or post or whatever. And that's going to get you more likes and more comments. It's a social validation feedback loop, exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you are exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Do you know what economists actually have a name for this? They call it the attention economy. The attention economy. A company can only get your money if they can get your attention. And our attention span, guys, is dwindling. Guess how long our attention span was in the year 2000? A whopping 12 seconds. I know you're thinking, that's barely anything. Do you know what it is now? 8 seconds. Do you know what the attention span of a goldfish is? 9 seconds. Does that slap you in the face? So what's the point of all this? It's easy just to assume that this pace of life is normal, but it is not normal. We really had a huge moment in 1440 when the printing press was produced. That was a huge moment in history. The next huge moment, 2007, the invention of smartphones. Facebook just came out, Instagram came out, social media came out, the digital age began, and since then we have been on a frenetic pace. We cannot stop, we can't get enough. This time famine that we are facing is relatively new. After a millennia of a slow, gradual acceleration in recent decades, the sheer velocity of our culture has reached an exponential fever pitch. And I know a lot of adults are in here like, yeah, listen to this, kids. Listen to this. But guys, think about this. Like when I played Little League growing up, we played like 13 games. I was on a good team. We played 13 games. Tournaments had just started and for baseball. And now you could be in a tournament every weekend and never be in church. You're practicing 4, 5, 6 times a day. An hour, like nonstop, watching videos. Your coaches are sending you stuff, and these kids are 9 and 10. I'm not ripping on it because I have a son who plays club baseball. What I'm saying is it's not normal. And this is the aspect as a parent that we have to think about how we push our kids into this frenetic activity all the time. We have to ask some serious questions. How are we cultivating this behavior? It's not just a phone that our kids have. It's a responsibility that we have to guide our generation, this generation. Okay, so my simple question is, what is all this distraction, addiction, and pace of life doing to our souls? What is it doing to us? Because whether you're addicted to your cell phone or not, which most of us are and don't realize it, do you have free time? You're addicted to something. But it doesn't feel the same because you're addicted to like being busy. In fact, it's praised. It used to be celebrated when like they would show like the Joe Camel commercials. There's a cigarette, if you guys didn't know. I probably shouldn't be talking about that in church. But the point is that they would show the people at the pool just chilling and relaxing. It was always about, they'd show a cool watch commercial, and it was always about leisure. Now, if you see a watch commercial, they're like in a business suite, and they're up on the 13th floor, and they're looking out of their domain and everything they're doing. Leisure used to be celebrated, and now work is celebrated more and more. And in order to get ahead, you have to work more than the next person. Anxiety has gone up, and you might think it's because we've gotten worse, right? A pandemic, a war looming with Russia. Who knows what's going to happen? Finances. We have more cars. Listen, in the 1980s, our family, and I'm 7 brothers, we had one car. One car. How are we getting places? Now every driveway you drive by now looks like a used car parking lot. 4 and 5 cars. Wow, we got so many cars. Like, we have more stuff. We carry around these things. Can you believe this thing costs $1,000 and we have like 6 of them in our homes? What? Think about that in the 1980s. Well, for those who were around then. But it's just crazy to think about. I want to read something to you to show that this is not about the time that we live in, the anxiety and depression. For a small amount of perspective at this moment, imagine you were born in 1900. I found this on the internet. When you were 14, World War I starts and ends on your 18th birthday with 22 million people killed. Later in the year, a Spanish flu epidemic hits the planet and runs until you're 20. 50 million people die from it in those 2 years. 50 million people. When you're 29, the Great Depression begins. Unemployment hits 25%. Global GDP drops 27%. That runs until you're 33. You're 33 right now. Plenty of reason to have anxiety and depression for sure. The country nearly collapses along with the world economy. When you turn 39, World War II starts. You aren't even over the hill yet. You've seen 2 world wars, epidemic that's killed 50 million people, a Great Depression, the worst Americans ever seen. When you're 41, the United States is fully pulled into World War II. Between your 39th and 45th birthday, 75 million people perish in the war, and the Holocaust kills 12 million people. At 52, the Korean War starts and 5 million people perish. At 64, the Vietnam War begins, and it doesn't even end for many years. 4 million people die in that conflict. Approaching your 62nd birthday, you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, a tipping point in the Cold War. Life on our planet as we know it could have ended. Great leaders prevented that from happening. As at 75, the Vietnam War finally ends. That's plenty of reason to have anxiety. But think about your grandma. Think about her. Like if you're my age, like in your 40s, and your grandma, when you were in the 80s and 90s, she's like the most peaceful woman you would ever met. I would not know the word anxiety around her or depression. But she grew up in a time that is unparalleled, even to the time that we live in now. So is it the times that we have more anxiety? Is it what we're facing that we have more anxiety? Is it what's going on in this world? Is it our finances? Is it the fact that we don't have enough cars? We don't have enough money? Now, every home, if you don't have both people working full-time jobs, it's hard, right? And you single moms definitely know it. It's not easy. People are stressed out about finances, and you got 2 people bringing home the money. Can you imagine if you had 2 people working? I mean, in the 80s, if you're like, you'd have, no, of course you'd have 3 or 4 cars in your driveway, and cell phones and computers and, wow, you sound like a grumpy old man, Pastor Dave. Can I get to the good stuff? This is the good stuff. We're afraid. Why are we afraid? What's going on? What's causing this fear? It's not what's happening in the world. It's not. As I just read, there are much darker times that we could look back on and say we're much worse than what we're sitting in right now. So why are we so afraid? Why are we so anxious? Why are we so filled with anxiety and depression and worry? And I'm not saying things aren't bad now, but what I'm saying is things will always be bad, and there will always be a dark moment in every generation to come. There will always be a moment that is overwhelming, that looks impossible. It will always happen. We'll always be on the brink of war. We'll always be dealing with a struggling economy. We'll always be dealing with difficulty in finances. It does not change. There's always going to be more that we need. So we need more money to get that more that we need. It's always going to be there. What's the problem? Why is there so much fear? 1 John 4:18 says this: there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect by love. I want to say that again. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Who is the only one that can have the attribute of perfect love? Jesus. I don't know if you've ever been in love before. I've been there, maybe, right? Been in that moment, beautiful moment. When you love someone, when you have this perfect love in them, you have this belief that you're safe with them, that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. The world can be falling apart, but when you're in this perfect love moment, you don't even feel any of it. And then when you do feel it, and then you come back to that person that you're in love with, you feel safety again. You feel safety again. And so, can you imagine what perfect love is like? It does not let you down. There is no reason to worry. This is why there is no fear in love. What they mean is there's no fear in Jesus, because you know that if he loves you, no matter what you face, and this is what about perfect love is, it's so amazing. No matter what happens, you know that the person that loves you, that has perfect love over you, will not let you down. As difficult as it seems, as overwhelming it is, as impossible that your life situation you may be facing, you have that perfect love. And so they see something bigger than you could ever understand, and they will protect me and walk with me through this. And so when the verse says, perfect fear, or perfect love drives out fear. This is how you could meet someone who is facing incredibly difficult circumstances and they have peace. Why is that? Because they found perfect love. They have peace because no matter what's happening, they trust God. They're not worried. They don't have to fret. But why do we not feel that perfect love? Why do we have so many people, even in the body of Christ, who are living these frenetic lives, overwhelmed? Well, it gives us a glimpse of that in Psalms 91:1. It says this: whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Two real quick phrases I want to focus on, then we're going to end it. The first one is dwell. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. According to Webster's dictionary, the definition dwell says this: to remain, to abide, to live as a resident, to reside, to keep the attention directed, an inhabitant. So if I say, if you want to be sheltered in a world that is falling apart, what do you have to do? You have to dwell. What does dwell mean? That you've made your home what you like. You ever get home from work? It's a long day. I had to deal with some people. No, I'm joking. It's been a long day. It's been difficult. And you're like, it's good to be home. There's no place I'd rather run to, right? We're from Kansas. We know the phrase, right? There's no place like home. There really isn't. The place that you know that when you get to, you're sheltered, you're covered, you're protected, you're safe. This is what it is to dwell, is what is it that you run to in your moments of fear, worry, anxiety. For all of us, some of it's we dive into work, right? We dwell in our work. For some students, it's we dwell in our schools. We dwell in our studies. We dwell in our extracurricular activities, right? We dwell in our video games, adults. It's crazy. We dwell. What do we dwell in? Because what you dwell in is where you will find your safety. And the problem is when you turn off that Netflix show, it's back to the real life. But when you dwell in God, that's when the peace comes. And I believe this whole revival thing that is happening is because God is wanting to not bring a revival of hype and necessarily healings and miracles and people running in and out of doors and all this crazy stuff. But the one thing that we need to be revived to is the peace and presence of God in our everyday lives. But this is the problem. We aren't stopping, because people are like, well, why don't we have a revival here at this church? You know, in Asbury, they didn't have all these lights and all this loud music. Maybe it's because we're trying too hard. No. It's because us as individuals are not willing to stop and dwell. It doesn't have anything to do with the church service, and revivals don't happen in buildings. What happens is they happen in the single hearts of men and women, and those men and women, as the revival's happening, come together, and you see the outpouring in a big way, because as individuals, we came together as the body of Christ. Like, oh my gosh, revival's not happening at that college in the building because the college has done something special. It's happening because God has done something in the hearts of the men and women there, because they have taken long enough to stop to dwell in the presence of the Lord. And so you can make a decision to dwell. But then it goes on to say this: whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Now, I said earlier that I like, one of my sons is in club baseball, and they always have two games, like on a Saturday. They'll play at like 8 and 10. So annoying. People inevitably bring their little tent things, these structures. You get there at 8, you set the tent up, and you're in the shade. But by noon, guess what's happened? That sun has moved. And now, even though you're directly under the tent, there's no shade there anymore. You got to move back past the tent. Because why? The sun is constantly moving, so the shade is constantly moving. And in order to stay in the shade, what do you have to do? You have to follow the sun. See, what happens is we want to sit. And I get it, but now we go back to this. John 1:38 that we read at the beginning. Jesus, turning around, saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" How would you answer that question? Maybe you'd say peace. Maybe you'd say financial security. They said, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" Where are you staying? They could have asked maybe for anything in that moment. Take care of my family, heal my grandma. Could have been anything that they asked for in that moment, right? Jesus is looking at you and he's saying, "What is it that you want?" And the disciples literally say, "Well, we want to know where you're going to be. Where are you staying?" And then Jesus answers them, "Come, and you will see." Listen, I don't have a magic fix about this time thing. We can't just stop and go back to chopping down trees. And I guess you could. You could go live in the mountains somewhere. But that's going to be very hard for most of us. We still have life. But we have to ask a serious question. What is it that we really want? What is it that you want? Do you want peace? Peace is not going to come from financial security. Peace is not going to come because your kid goes to college on a scholarship, because they played baseball every day of their life for the last 12 years. Peace is not going to come because your kids made it with straight A's and you push them really hard to be successful. Peace is going to come when we choose as a family, as a body, and as an individual to dwell in the house of the Lord so that we'll find shelter in the shadow of the Most High. And then this has happened. When the disciples followed him, they went to eat with him that night, and then guess what Jesus did? He got up and he moved. Just like the sun is always moving, the shadow is always moving, you have to continue to move with Jesus. Where are you going? What do you want from me next? Where do you want me to go? And so this is the thing. I've been trying to figure out how can I get rid of my cell phone, but there's certain things that I have to do on it for work. And I'm like, I want to get rid of it, but at the same, so I'm trying to figure out this balance, okay? I can't just say, I want to be Amish, right? You can't just be Amish. I mean, I guess maybe you could. I don't know. I'd have to Google it. Ask Siri or something. Maybe she'd tell me how to become Amish in Kansas City. I don't know if there's a large Amish community in Kansas City. I'm not sure. Like, obviously, this is not like a perfect A plus B equals C equation. This is you dwelling in the house of the Lord and him showing you, okay, this is the next step. And then when you take that, this is what he's doing. He says, okay, where are you staying? Come, I'll show you. And then you take that step with him. And then guess what? Inevitably, the sun moves. The shadow changes. I want to stay in the shadow, so I take the next step with him. See, this is the best part about God. This is a journey. He loves you. He wants you to know him. He wants you to know his peace. He wants you to be overwhelmed with it. He wants you to know his security, his grace. He wants you to know his forgiveness. He wants you to have all of it. But some of us, we just come up to guys like, what do you want? Like, well, I want forgiveness. Okay, here's forgiveness. He gives it to you, and then he moves. Okay, he's ready for you to take the next step after forgiveness. Okay, what's next? What's next? Because this is how God works, right, Josh? Whenever we get rid of something, it's not just to get rid of it, but it's to replace it with something else. And we sang the song, Make Room. We're going to end 5 minutes, so I've gone so long today. We're just going to take a moment, and we're going to sing this song, Make Room, and you're going to sit in your chairs for a moment, and you're going to ask God to search your heart. What is it in my schedule, in my time? What is it? I forgot to tell you this, parents. We don't have TVs in our kids' rooms, and all the rooms on the second floor, they can't take their cell phones up to their room. Everything happens in the main room. Just that's a little hint there. We don't do it. We don't have the TV on. It's just our thing. It's still a fight with our kids, though. Get off that thing. Get off YouTube. Get off YouTube. It's still going to be a fight in moments, but what I'm saying is you have to make a decision on how are we as individuals, how are we as a family unit, how are we as people going to move closer to God? Because, guys, that is the only place. I'm telling you this right now. If you are full of anxiety and depression, worry, doubt, insecurity, fear, the only place that you will find peace that brings freedom, true freedom and peace, is dwelling with the Lord. Only place. Everything else is an escape for a moment, treading water in a sea that you feel like you're drowning in. Everything is an escape for a moment. It's not just drugs. It's the drug of our cell phones, the drug of our work, the drug of our school, the drug. I'm not saying don't go to school, kids. It's the drug of the time. So as we sit here in this moment, in silence, I'm asking you to ask God, what is it, where is it that you dwell outside of him? What is it that you run to? What is it that you need to remove to make room for him? And I say this not as a preacher, not as a parent, but as an individual who is on this search with you, trying to figure, and failing most of the time. I'm not saying, but I have not figured it out. I have a wonderful wife who reminds me, you've been on your phone too much. It's just true. Where do you need to make room for him today? Not just in some emotional song or on a Sunday morning. How do you need to make room for him in your life? Dads, How do you need to make room for him in your life that your kids see it? There's a lot of things that are important to Dad. But you know what I know is really important to him? Is Jesus. Not because he said we had to go to church. Because I see how he pursues him. How he's made room for him in his life. You guys can go ahead and sing that for a second. Let's just sit here in calm for a moment.
Here is where I lay down every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you, Jesus, to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. So shake up the ground of all my traditions, break down the walls, all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. So shake up the ground of all my traditions, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. 'Cause your way is better. Yeah, your way is better. 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 Your way is better.
As we end today, this is what I want to remind you of. Dwelling is not about coming to this place, even though it's awesome when we come to this place and he's here. It's about he is with you where you go. Recognize him, follow him, listen to him. If you don't know him today, I'm telling you, he wants a relationship with you. He wants you to connect with him more than anything. So much he sent his son to die for you. So I'm just going to do this, and we're not going to raise hands, but I'm going to ask you. It says in the word, if we confess with our mouth that Jesus, Lord, and believe in our hearts that he's raised from the dead, that we will be saved. And so I'm going to ask you to repeat this prayer after me, but the important part of this prayer is not the words that you say, but about what you do with your heart when you leave this room, okay? Words are important. The actions are what matter, though. So I'm going to ask everyone just to repeat this after me. And if this is you in here for the first time, this is the beginning of an incredible journey. A journey towards peace, a journey towards freedom, a journey towards forgiveness, reconciliation, a journey. And it starts with this first step, into the shadow. Just please repeat after me, just everyone in this room. Say this not with your mouths, just your mouths, but say this with your hearts. Dear God, I need you. I'm sorry. I've done life without you. Please forgive me of my sins, of my mistakes, of my failures. Be my Savior. I give you my life, that you would be my Lord, that you would direct my actions, my words, my thoughts. I give you control. I surrender to you. In your precious name we pray. Amen.